what he thought. This guy sounds like me. And he picked his name. His name was Josh Lackey. And he said, hey, I'm going to make believe I'm Josh Lackey. So he got on the phone, and he's calling AT&T as Josh Lackey, who's the head of support. And he's saying, hey, this is Josh. Listen, I heard that there's some competition going on at DEF CON, and we need to make sure all of our systems are secure. What OS are you using? What's your antivirus? What's your PDF reader? And these guys are all like just, here it is, here it is, here it is. So he actually ends up calling someone who knows Josh personally. So this guy texts Josh and says, Josh, some guy just called as you, but I know it's not your voice. What are you doing? And Josh is 2 doors down in DEF CON, no joke, at another speech, and he says, that's not me. And he comes out, and he comes in the room with these 4 big guys, and he's like, who's saying they're Josh Lackey? And I'm sitting up front, and I'm like, the guy in the booth. You know what I mean? He's the guy in the booth, yeah, just take him, you know? And it ends up being a great picture. He's like, they end up taking a picture together and saying, hey, you know, this is, and he was really cool about it, really cool. But at first it was like, what are you doing? You know, you're calling people, making believe you're me. It was a little crazy. It was a really great story. So we had the NSA, we had that happen, and then, I don't know if any of you guys listened to Infected Mushroom, we got to social engineer our way and backstage in the Infected Mushroom concert and hang out with those guys. This is a cool year, nothing to do with the data at all. I just put it in there because it was fun. Okay, now we wanted to take it another step further. So we did noobs, all noobs, then we did experience versus noobs, then we did men versus women, and now we wanted to do this, like who's the deadliest social engineer, and we again wanted to have a men versus women competition, but on a different level. Like we were going to match experienced men against experienced women, and inexperienced men against inexperienced women, again to see if the data would correlate any different. And this year was our first female winner of the social engineering capture the flag. Even though the previous year as a whole, the women scored more points, we never had a woman win. This year was our first female winner for the competition. She didn't just win, guys. She killed us, like 500-point difference in between her and the next person underneath her. She like obliterated. You ever hear of this researcher called Amy Cuddy? Amy Cuddy? No, she does a whole thing on body language. She talks about power posing, and she talks about doing like the Wonder Woman stance. You know, you do this for 2 minutes and you have high confidence, something like that. So she's in the back of the room standing like this, and I'm like, who's this freak, you know? And then she gets in the booth, and she just wipes the floor with everybody. I mean, she was phenomenal. She was really, really phenomenal. So what did we learn from this? Well, again, the data showed us that if you use sympathy and assistance themes is what most of the women used, that people were very willing to give over all sorts of information, and it worked much better than authority-based themes. So saying things like, hey, listen, I'm the head of IT, and we got a breach, and I need to get all this information from you, worked not as good as if you said, hey, my boss is making me work late, and, you know, it really stinks, and, you know, I'm overtime, and I got to get home to my kid. Maybe you can help me out with this survey I have to take. And people would fall for that a lot easier. So we saw that work amazingly well. This year, we also did something different. We had a kids competition. I made a huge Twitter blunder. So I had this idea that we had a kids social engineering competition, and they couldn't make phone calls. We weren't going to put kids on the phone. So they had to solve ciphers and puzzles and things like that. And the last competition, they're putting together something called a skiddly code. It's a piece of paper wrapped around a tube that spells out a cipher, and they have to solve the cipher. And I wanted to have somebody shooting them with a Nerf rifle while they were doing this, thinking it would be fun for the kids. So I tweeted, if there's any snipers out there that want to shoot kids in Vegas, DM me. Yeah, that wasn't too bright. That got me some attention I wasn't looking for. But we got these 2 guys that answered. So we set them up with these Nerf rifles, and they got to shoot children with Nerf darts while they were doing this thing. It was a whole other social engineering competition. Nothing to do with the data here, but again, a really fun part of the SECTF. Part of the data with that was just kind of educating children and how critical thinking skills are very, very important, and we're going to tie that back in a second. One other thing that happened in this DEF CON also, this is DEF CON 21, is we had the chance to work with Apollo Robbins. Anyone know Apollo? It's called the Gentleman Thief. He does the pickpocketing. You know, he picks people pockets. You can watch these videos on YouTube. He's truly amazing. Like, he just walks up to a complete stranger and he'll take your watch off, take your tie off, you don't even know it's gone. And we had him come in to DEF CON. We did a big speech together, and we were talking about this topic, how social engineering is such a big threat and why in-person social engineering is so dangerous and what we can do to defend against it, and bringing awareness to the average person on things like in-person scams, pickpocketing, and things like that. And he brought a guy up on the stage and literally took his watch off and his wallet out of his pocket without him knowing. You know, and the guy was fully aware. He was like, I'm going to do this, and you're not going to know. And he's like, no, you won't. And he then had his watch. And it was like, I was standing right there watching it and couldn't believe what I saw. And it was a very good speech. Matter of fact, something really amazing happened at this. There was a good friend of Apollo's that heard that we were doing this speech together, and he wanted to come hear us do this speech for a movie he was in. So we got a chance to hang out and meet Will Smith, which was really cool. Because he was interested in social engineering too. Now, how does all this tie back in? Well, what does this have to do with anything? Well, the aspects of social engineering that were important for this year, we're trying to look at how it affects each of us individually. Because not every person responded to sympathy. Not every person responded to authority. But each company, again, was compromised by the end of the day. The report again showed how much social engineering was not being fixed. And we kept looking at the data and saying, well, what can we do to fix it? And the only answer was critical thinking and education were the only things that can potentially fix social engineering or help people be aware of it and defend against it. So last year, excuse me, we wanted to do something that we've never done. I really honestly thought this was going to fail miserably, and it was tag teams. So what we did is we got teams of 2 people, and they had to go in the booth at the same time. And they had to tag out, which meant that while you're on the call with a target, you had to come up with an excuse, a pretext, to say, you're going to speak to my partner, right? I mean, like, think about it. If you ever were on a call with, like, your cell phone vendor, and you called support, and they said, hold on, I'm going to transfer you to Ruth over here. Wouldn't that be a little odd? You'd be a little frustrated. And they had to do it back and forth at least 3 times during the call. We were trying to make it so that we would fail and the companies would succeed. That's what we were trying to do, right? That we would fail and companies would succeed. And we chose retail. This was our theme for this year. It was retail. We wanted to have, like, all the big companies that Americans use every day, they go to shop at every day, to see if this was a big problem. Well, I'll talk about that in a minute. That's a weird picture, me handcuffing a girl. Okay, so here's what we had. So this was our booth. 2 people in it at all times, and they had to come up with a pretext. Now, think about what kind of pretext you would use if this was you. There was a couple that we heard that were really fascinating. Like, here's one. One guy who had a friend of his in the booth with him. It was a man and a woman team. He said that he was training her in tech support. So they were going to transfer back and forth for training purposes. And the woman fell for it. She actually fell for it. Another team, actually the person on the phone recognized the number that they were calling from was not the corporate number. So she said, hey, the number you're calling from is not corporate. If you're calling from support, why isn't it the corporate number? And he said, oh, I'm calling with my teammate, and we're using Adobe Connect. So that's why the number looks different. And she went, oh, okay. She fell for it, right? Every time an excuse was given, it was accepted as an acceptable excuse. I was amazed. I do this for a living, and I was sitting there going, why is this working? No one's stopping them. And we had to analyze this piece of data very closely. So what we found is that people, humans, we want to fill in the gaps for others. We want to not have people feel bad or embarrassed. That's human nature. So when someone says something that doesn't quite make sense to us, we end up filling in those gaps. I'll give you a story. We were doing a penetration test, and our goal was to get through the front door. And I had to get through security, and the security was a woman at the front desk, and I had to drop USB keys. And the USB keys would just have a little beacon that would ping home, no malware on it. They would just tell us if someone put it in. And the USB keys were in white envelopes, and the envelopes would be marked something like employee bonuses, salary information, things like that to get people's interest. We wanted to see if anyone would put that in. And on the envelope, there'd be a sticker that says, if you find this, please return it to HR. So we hoped that they wouldn't do it. Well, I'm walking up to the front door, and I see this guy. He pulls in this little BMW into one of the parking slots that say VP, like the CEO, one of those guys, and he's on his cell phone. He's really angry. And I can see him from far away, and he's standing outside of his car, and he's gesturing like this. And I get up close to him, and I hear him say, I really don't want to do this. I'm really upset. I don't want to do this. I don't know what he's talking about, but I can see that he's physically upset. So I walk in the front door, and the woman sitting at the front desk, her monitor is just turned enough that I can see the reflection in the window. She turns and says, how can I help you? And literally, this cannot be planned. This was not planned. I had no clue this was going to happen, but I saw it and figured, let me try to use it. She was playing Minesweeper on her computer at work, right? So I see it, and I go, listen, hey, you don't know me. My name's Paul, but your boss is outside, and he's really upset. And if he walks in and sees that on your screen, he may get mad. You may want to shut it down. She clicks the X on it, and he comes in, and he goes, Beth, in my office. And she's walking to his office. She turns around, and she mouths to me, thank you, right? And I'm like, I'm in. I'm doing the happy dance, So I wait. People are coming up. Hey, can I help you? I'm like, no, Beth, she's coming out. Don't worry, she'll help me. So I wait. Beth comes out, and she goes, where were we? And I said, oh, you were just about to give me a badge and let me in for my meeting at HR. And she paused, and she looked at me, thinking, I can almost see it in her face, we weren't there. And then she sighed. She went, okay. And she handed me a badge and beat me in. Now, later on, okay, so I got in, the whole company was compromised, everything was bad for them. I came back for the report meeting, and I asked her, I said, you knew that we weren't there, right? Because you sighed. And she goes, yeah, I knew. I said, why did you let me in? And she goes, because you were so nice. You saved me from being embarrassed. And I felt like I owed you. You see how that works? It was fascinating for me because I started to look at that and go, okay, so she knew. Her brain was saying, this guy, we weren't there. No, he didn't. We weren't at that point. And yet she still let me through the door because I was nice and I saved her from embarrassment. And that's the way we work, right? That's the way we work up here. She felt obligated to me. The sense of obligation, it's a principle of influence. The sense of obligation to give me a gift back because I gave her a gift first. And that gift was a compromise of her company. So pretty serious. So we started to look at this same principle with this year in the CTF and started to say, well, is this working? And it is, because anytime someone used a compliment or some type of obligatory statement, making them feel obligated to the social engineers, the person on the phone gave over information, ignored the fact that sometimes the excuses made no sense. One guy actually said on the phone, the lady said, hey, how come your number is not from corporate? And she said, the guy on the phone, the social engineer, he said, that's because I'm calling from my cell phone because our corporate line is having problems. This was no joke, his excuse. And the way I'm okay. And then a minute later, he's got a transfer to his partner. So he says, I'm going to have you talk to, I forget what her name, I'm going to have you talk to Mary. And the woman says, wait, but if you're calling from your cell phone, how am I talking to Mary? And he goes, three-way calling. And she goes, okay. And you're like, wait, no, don't say okay. I felt like picking up the phone. No, that's wrong. Say no, hang up. But she didn't do it. She fell for it. The excuse made sense, and she didn't want to embarrass this guy. Fascinating bits of data. Really, really fascinating bits of data. The room was packed the whole time. We really couldn't believe how exciting it was for that past year because of how much interest there was in social engineering. So yesterday, I walked around and I asked just people I've never met before, if in Russia, if you think that social engineering is more of a threat or network hacking is more of a threat. So let's do this here as a room. If you think that network hacking is, and there's no right or wrong answer, okay? So just vote how you like. But this time, everybody vote, okay? None of this half of you just sitting there making believe you can't understand me. So if you think network hacking is more of a serious problem to corporate culture, raise your hand. Okay, good, sizable amount. And now, if you think social engineering is more of a problem to corporate culture, raise your hand. And this is what I often see. So now, think about this, and I really would love to have this discussion with some of you. 90% of us that voted put our hand up for social engineering. If we all believe it and we agree that this is the biggest problem, why are we not fixing it? Why is it not getting any better? Why is it that we're 6 years into a social engineering competition that happens the same month every year, we're calling almost the same companies every year, and it's working the same every year? And I'm doing this for a living. We're doing the vishing and phishing and break-ins for a living, and we're using the most ridiculous pretexts ever, and it's working. Why is it still working? That's the question we really have to start analyzing and answering, because 90% of us here are voting that social engineering is the biggest problem. And many of us we're right about this, but how do we fix it? Well, we started to have a different type of room after the competition. So we had the CTF, and last year was the first year where we had speeches in the room. So we had an actual DEF CON track, and we invited people in to speak on topics that we hoped would educate the masses on social engineering. So we had some people that you may or may not know. This is Jason Street. He does some really interesting work. He actually travels the globe, and he has done break-in jobs, so paid for social engineering impersonation all over the globe, all over the Middle East, America, Europe, all over the place. And to the left here, your left, is Michelle Fincher. She works with me. She's a field-trained psychologist, and she understands how humans think. She talked about influence. Kevin Mitnick, very famous social engineer, we invited him in to talk about how he did his attacks back in the day, and he demoed some really interesting things. This is Dave Kennedy, the creator of SET, Social Engineer Toolkit. He talked about why he created that and how it has helped educate the masses on how easy it is to do things like phishing and payload delivery through email. And we invited these people in with the hope that what we would do is bring more of a light to the needs for education. Because how do you fix social engineering? There's not a plug, right? I can't give you a patch that you plug into your network and it always protects you from phishing. That's not possible, is it? How many of your, I work for big companies, how many of you does your marketing department send out emails that look just like phish, right? Tons of us. I mean, I don't know about you, but I see it all the time working with HR or marketing departments, and their emails look just like phishing emails. And they're not, but they look just like it. How many times do legitimate phone calls come in, but you don't know if they're legitimate? They sound like phishing calls. And how many of you have a policy that you're not supposed to let someone into the door unless you see their badge? But how many times have you seen people let anyone in? I got a really good friend, great story. Her name is Sharon Kanhidi. She's a female social engineer in the UK. And she recently got married, and she got pregnant. And she had this job. She was 6 or 7 months pregnant. And she had this job to break into this building. So she thought, hey, I'm going to use the baby as a prop, in essence. So she got a big box, and she filled it with some things. And she started walking towards the door like it was real heavy, and these 3 guys came running out. What are you doing carrying that box when you're pregnant? And she goes, oh, I'm supposed to take this to the server room, and it's just so heavy. And these guys take the box, they bring her in, no ID check, bring her right to the server room, put the box down. They all put their business cards down. Hey, if you need any help, just call us, no problem. Shut the door and go, have a good day. Let her in the server room, right? So she says, this is genius. So she gives birth to the baby, right? Then she goes on Amazon and she buys a fake baby bump, a styrofoam baby bump, right? Guys, we're screwed. We can't do this. It doesn't work. I tried. No, I didn't try. I didn't. No, I'm not wearing that now, by the way. So she bought a fake baby bump. It's styrofoam. And she puts like USB keys and a laptop up in there. And then she walks into a building acting all pregnant and she gets in. It's amazing, right? Amazing. Don't do that. Okay. But it's just, when you look at these things about how easy it is, well, how do you fix that? You can't, there's no patch or plugin or software. You can't now put a sign up, any pregnant women need to be inspected. You can't do that, right? So how do you do it? Well, education. Education is the only fix for social engineering. There's no way that we could possibly fix. Oh, DEF CON 23, that's this year. If you want to know what it is, you should come and find out or wait for the report. It's going to be a big, big year for us. Because we've been doing this for 5 years, and then we've also been doing it from a corporate level for about that long too, where we've been phishing and vishing and doing impersonation attacks on companies for 5 years. We've been looking at this data and saying, well, really, can education possibly fix it? So here's some things that we did, and unfortunately we couldn't do for the CTF, but here's how it worked for us, is we would take a company that, let's say, has 100,000 employees, and we would phish all of their employees once a month, and then we would educate them. So we would send them a phishing email, and then we would educate them on what phishing is and what they could have done to catch that email. We set up proper reporting methods, so where they should report phishing emails, and what to do when they see it. Like, don't click, don't forward it to your friends. No joke, guys, this is another story. We had an email that we sent, a phishing email with a payload on it, and it was really simple. It was something like, we need you to open up this accounts payable sheet. Please open it and let us know if you have any problems. So it had a shell in it, had an interpreter reverse shell, clicked, got a shell. Then a minute later, we see another shell from the same thing. And then 10 minutes later, 2 more shells. And then half an hour later, 2 more shells. And we're like, what's happening? Why are there so many shells from the same payload? Well, what happened is when the first person couldn't open it, she forwarded it to her friend at the next cube and said, can you open it? He couldn't open it. So he forwarded it to the HR department. They double-clicked it 3 times. They couldn't open it, so they forwarded it to the IT department, and the IT guy tried to open it on 3 different machines. So we had shells all over the network, and it was because they forwarded it. So we educate people, don't forward phish. Now, this is the bad thing. So what's the results, okay? Years of phishing people and educating them. How does it work? Well, we saw in this one company, I'm telling you, a 70% reduction. 70% reduction in the amount of actual malware-related incidents due to phishing. 70% reduction. So education seems to be the only thing that works because patches weren't doing it. Antivirus, I love it. I love it. I tell you, my favorite, I see their booth here, is Kaspersky. I love Kaspersky. But it's a management tool. It's not a security tool, right? Because it's only going to save you from viruses with known signatures. What about the O days? What about the brand new virus or malware that just came out yesterday or just came out this afternoon and it's hitting your corporate network? No antivirus can save you from that. What if they're using the systems that hide their shell code inside other programs? You're not going to get saved from using a management tool. Education is the only thing. Internal pretext. We learned this is a huge, huge thing. When you have an internal pretext, that means you're coming from HR, you're coming from IT, you're coming from some other department within the company. That works amazing. People really fell for that quite a lot. Well, other things we learned. Women are scary. Women are really scary, guys. I mean it. They look all pretty and nice, but they're scary. And they're really, really good at social engineering. They're just naturals at it. We have rules. And I think that from a corporate level, if you decide to get into social engineering as a career path, that I think the rules should maintain there. There's one thing I always say to my employees is that we need to think like the bad guys, but remember that we're the good guys. So we have to have the capacity to think like we're one of the bad guys, but always remember that we're here to help. So we don't want to ever use embarrassment, shame, fear, humiliation. Those things have no place in the corporate environment for education. And this one, 37 handoffs. This one team, they handed off 37 times in 30 minutes. So I set up a rule that I thought was going to make it impossible. I thought that it was going to make it like we were going to fail as social engineers, and 37 handoffs in 30 minutes. That's like averaging more than 1 a minute. Unbelievable. And it was just literally just going back and forth between the two. And the person on the phone never even noticed. And posting your passwords in like the little help documents, guys, that's a bad idea. I know it seems like common sense, but I feel like I should bring it up because last year, I forgot to say this, we found that also another login page with a real working username and password in the help document. So, if you're working for a big company, go make sure that your passwords and stuff aren't on there. So this is our themes that we had so far. And DEF CON 23, who knows what we're going to do for this year and next year. But we're always open to suggestions, ideas. We take them from everyone. If you want to come, if you just want to email, if you want to say it here, we're all good. We got some time for questions. I think about 7 or 8 minutes left for questions. So if anybody has any questions, it doesn't have to be about this topic, anything to do with social engineering. If you don't, I see hands, no? I'm going to start calling on people. That's what I do. Here, we got one up here.
Chris, thank you for. I have a very simple question. You said that social engineering works because we are human. If we should struggle with social engineering, we became more and more unhuman. Example from other part, you know CAPTCHA, and we are human, and at least 3 times a day, I try to prove to robot that I am a human. If social engineering not work, we really became inhuman.
Yeah, if I understand your point, it's a valid point, because I get asked this, do we want to encourage people to become less human to fight social engineering? The answer is no, 100% no. We don't want to be terrible communicators. We don't want to lack trust, lack rapport building just to fight social engineering. That is not the case. I'll give you an example, if I can, to help. With vishing, people will say, how do you fight vishing? Well, here's what we do for our customers, is we set up on their intranet a color of the day. So, and not something like yellow, blue. It has to be something really ridiculous, like seafoam green, you know, something like that. And every day it changes. Now, I call you, and I say, hey, I'm Paul from HR. I want to get your government ID number and your date of birth. And you say, hey, Paul, what's the color of the day? Oh, I didn't check this morning. Oh, can you go check right now real quick? And you know, then I'll answer your questions. I can't get my computer. Okay, when you get it, call me back. And now what I've done is I've taken the need for you to not be human and to think out of the equation. And I've made it so now you can just put all that onus on me to have to prove to you that I'm the person I say I am. And that helps with keeping you a human, but also protecting you from an attack vector. So that's a really good question, though. We definitely don't want a bunch of paranoid people walking around either. Can you imagine that, how the companies would be if they were afraid to talk to anyone? You know, are you really from HR? And they start tasing people, it'd be terrible. So we don't want that. Other questions? Yes, over here. I'm gonna make this guy jog.
Thank you very much for your speech. It's amazing, it's very inspiring.
Thank you.
My question is, you said you're making penetration test, social engineering penetration test, and does it work? Does companies become more protected from social engineering attacks?
Yeah, that's a really good question. So 5 years ago when I started, we would be begging people to do phishing or vishing. And now in the last year and a half or two, people are calling us. And they're saying, we want to do phishing and vishing and impersonation as part of our pen test. Because they're seeing that, you know, software is getting pretty hard to crack. I mean, we got really good hackers. I'm sure some of them sitting right in this room. Some of the best hackers in the world come from Russia, writing some of the most amazing O-days, right? Just really just mind-blowing. But if it's going to take you 50 or 60 or 70 or 100 hours to write that exploit, but I can get in by making 2 phone calls, well, where are we, right? You're going to be writing the exploit. I'm going to make 2 phone calls. And companies are realizing we don't protect against this. We're protecting against the viruses and the malware and the Trojans, and we got IDS systems and packet inspection and antivirus. We have firewalls coming out the ears, but no one knows how to recognize a fish. So it is becoming a lot more prevalent for people to use penetration testing in America. Now, again, I can't speak on Russia. I don't know if that's the case. We do a little bit of work in Japan, and I can tell you that Japan's about 5 years behind America where we are with security in the social engineering sense. Very advanced technologically, but when it comes to social engineering, Japan is still a very, very trusting culture. They haven't yet picked up the idea that social engineering is a real threat. Great question, though. Yes, sir. Gonna make you run.
Hi. You say that on your social engineer CTV, your targets are US companies, but also you say that you work in Japan, I think in some other countries. Is it a big difference when you work in other countries, when employees of the company understand that they're talking with some foreigners, maybe they're more cautious, or they just close their eyes on some of your mistakes?
Yeah, that's a really good question. So I'll tell you, from a Russian perspective, we did a fishing campaign for a company in Russia, and we fished Russians. And I had a point of contact here that helped me translate it into the Russian language. And my first email was very American. Amazing sale, this and that. And they were like, okay, calm down there. You know, you're way too excited. The Russians don't even smile. Like, don't, you know, stop being so happy. And I was like, really? Come on, this is going to work. And they're like, no, it's not. And they started editing the email so it was less American. You know, America, we make everything big, you know. It's amazing, it's wonderful, exclamation mark, exclamation mark. And they were like, yeah, just chill out, smiley boy. So we did. We chilled it out, and we brought it down, and it worked. And that was a big lesson for me, because the next month, I did a fishing campaign in Turkey, and they have a whole different culture than in Russia. And we had to start thinking about the cultural differences where we go. In Japan, they speak very close to you. Right? They get like right here when they talk to you. And in America, we kind of do this if you get too close, and that's rude in Japan. So they get very close to you, and you have to just kind of deal with it. So when we go to Japan to do work, you have to just realize that the culture, if I'm going to be the social engineer in a different culture, I have to accept your culture, not have you accept mine. So if I'm going to social engineer here, I would have to calm down my big words and the smile and try to be, you know, different than I am at home. In Japan, I have to let them get really close and, you know, talk a little quieter. I'm really loud. In Japan, I walk in a room and I talk like me, and everyone turns around. It's like, Godzilla, you know, it's like terrible. So I have to chill out a little bit, you know. That's a good question, though. Cultural differences do need to be considered, because that will be the effect on if you're first building rapport or not. And then people will start to ignore your little mistakes. So that's an excellent question. Thank you. Any others? We got two. How much time do I have?
Thank you again for the presentation. It was very nice. It was very interesting. Any advices about the top books or resources about the social engineering from you personally?
Yeah, so this is going to be very self-promotional, right? I have 3 books out, so of course I recommend all of them. But on the website, social-engineer.org, in the resources page, we have a list of every book that somebody in the company has read that has to do with psychology, influence, social engineering, or tech. Books by Johnny Long, amazing for Google dorking and OSI. There's a new guy, Basil is his name. He's an ex-FBI agent. What's his first name? Basil. Michael Basil. He wrote a book on open source intelligence. Truly, truly phenomenal. One of the best books I've ever read on OSINT. Then, of course, you know, I have books on social engineering. Kevin Mitnick has good books on social engineering, although they're mostly stories, not how-to. Sharon Kanhidi just came out with a book about social engineering. You'll find that on Amazon. Really phenomenal book. So there's a bunch, and we have them all listed on the website under the resources tab and the social-engineer.org. Yeah, very good. Thank you. There was one over here, too, I think. You guys should keep your questions to the same side. This poor guy.
Hi, Chris. Please tell, how do you do social engineering of some IT management or security engineers?
From a good point, you mean, or for actual work? Like, do you mean like to get the sale, or do you mean to do it as part of a pen test?
Some pen test. Not common people, but security officer or IT administrator.
Yeah, that's a good question. So because we always assume that security guys tend to be more in tune with our attack vectors, so we think that they're going to be better at combating us. But here's what I found. If I come in with ego suspension, so I come in down low and I let them be super smart, then that works with IT managers really good. You know, like if I come in with a phone call, let's say I'll be from HR and I'll be an intern. I'm like, oh, hey, this is Paul. Hey, I'm calling you from HR. I just got hired last week, so I'm really sorry if I'm not following the proper procedure. But our healthcare database, it just got washed because of some Obamacare thing. I don't even know. I'm just in college. I don't even know what's going on here. And they just told me to call all these people that have a red flag next to their name. I'm supposed to verify your details. So I have your name down as Michael. That's M-I-C-H-A-E-L. Is that right? Okay. And Smith, S-M-I-T-H. Yeah, that's good. Okay. I have your social security number down as 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Oh, that's not right? Whew, I'm so glad we caught that because, I don't know what would happen to your health care if we didn't. And then they correct you. But if I come in and say, hey, listen, I work for the boss, you're going to answer my questions, they're like, I'm the IT guy, I'm going to shut off your account now. So that doesn't work. But if I come in with ego suspension, it seems to work much better with the guys who feel that they're in more power in the company. Others? He's getting his workout for today.
Hello, Chris. Thanks for your amazing talk. I'd like to know if social engineering actually evolves over time. Like, do people gather new techniques and stuff?
Oh, that's a great question. Wow, can I have another hour? Can I take another hour? I'm just kidding. No, okay. That's a wonderful question. So we started to look at social engineering for as far back as human writing goes. So you look at things like if you're, and I'm not trying to talk about a taboo topic, but if you look back like in Bible books in Genesis, there's a big social engineering aspect between Isaac and his father, or Jacob and his father. They're the Trojan horse if you go back to Greek times. If you go back to con men back in Roman times, and you look at all of these principles of pretexting and fooling a person into thinking you're something you're not, they're almost identical to today. But what evolves is the technology. So today, you think about it, Victor Lustig, the same thing he did to convince 8 people to buy the Brooklyn Bridge is the same exact things that we're doing to fall for phishing or phishing emails right now. But the difference is, if you look at Dire Wolf, they have call centers of 100 people running phishing scams on innocents all over the globe to get their banking information. So the technology evolves to make social engineering easier. I mean, and don't raise your hands for this, but think about this. How many of you have Twitter, LinkedIn, and Facebook accounts? Just those 3. I have them, okay? But think about what happens here. You have Twitter. Let's start. You have LinkedIn. I know where you went to college, where you work, and where you ever worked. I know the groups that you're in, the things that you like, and some of the friends you have. If you're on Facebook, I know where you go on vacation. I know your girlfriend's name. I know your kids' names. I know your family. I know your friends there. I know the music you like, the concerts you go to, the food you eat. And if you use Twitter and you have Foursquare, I know where you're at every second of the day when you're checking in at the coffee shop, when you're working out, when you're driving to work, when you're tweeting the picture of the sunset, when you tweet that in Russia, you guys have those crazy car accidents that you put all over the internet, these whacked out meteors hitting the earth and stuff, right? So I know all those things about you. I can profile you psychologically. I can profile you psychologically based on just 3 social media things. So social engineering has not evolved, but what has evolved is the technology. So it makes it easier to profile you as a person. Yeah, oh boy, I could take another hour for that topic. That's a wonderful question. I'd be happy to discuss that outside in the hallway or something, even more so if am I getting kicked off now?
We have a QA section near the bar, and we have to start a new next speech, and
okay.
let's thank
That's
you.
it. Thank you, guys.
To Chris, yes.